When the doctor told me my son had been in a terrible car crash, I drove through the rain like a man already chasing a coffin. My name is Ethan Holloway. I am 68 years old, a retired naval systems engineer from Portland, Oregon, and until that night, I believed the most dangerous thing in my life was loneliness. I was wrong. The call came at 8:47 p.m. A woman who introduced herself as Dr. Marin Vale told me my only son, Noah Holloway, had been brought into Mercy Heights Medical Center after a high-speed collision on Interstate 5. Your son has severe spinal trauma, she said. He is being prepared for emergency surgery. I remember dropping the phone. I remember the coffee cup breaking near my feet. I remember staring at a photograph of Noah as a little boy, smiling with missing front teeth, and thinking, not him. Please God, not him. Noah was all I had left. My wife, Evelyn, had been gone for 3 years. Before she died, she held my hand and whispered, "Don't give up on him, Ethan. He still needs you." So I didn't, even when Noah's business failed, even when he asked for money, even when he convinced me to sign a life insurance policy worth $5 for million, saying it was only for family protection. He was my son, and love makes fools of even careful men. I grabbed my coat and drove straight into the storm. The rain hammered my windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. Headlights smeared across the wet road like ghosts. Twice my tires slipped, but I never slowed down. Noah was dying. That was all I could think. When Mercy Heights appeared through the rain, it looked less like a hospital and more like a concrete tomb. Half the building was covered in plastic sheets. Yellow renovation signs hung from the ceiling. The lobby was almost empty. No crying families. No rushing nurses. No chaos. Only silence. A security guard in black boots pointed me toward the service elevators. "5th floor," he said. "Surgical overflow." Something about his voice felt rehearsed, but I was too frightened to care. The elevator climbed slowly. Each floor number blinked like a countdown. When the doors opened, the smell hit me first. Not medicine, not antiseptic, but bleach. Too much bleach. The hallway lights flickered. The nursing station was empty. Patient log sat open on the desk. I leaned over it. There was Noah's name, but the ink was still wet. My heart began to beat harder. I followed the signs toward operating room 3. The red light above the door glowed like an angry eye. Behind the frosted glass, I could see movement. My hand reached for the metal handle. Then someone grabbed my arm. Hard. Before I could shout, I was pulled sideways into a dark supply room between 2 linen carts. A woman in green scrubs clamped her hand over my mouth. Her eyes were terrified. "Do not go in there," she whispered. "Please, Mr. Holloway. If you open that door, you die." I froze. She knew my name. I tried to pull away, but she held me with desperate strength. "My son is in there," I hissed when she lowered her hand. "He's dying." "No," she said. "He isn't." The words struck me harder than the storm outside. "What are you talking about?" "My name is Claire Bennett," she whispered. "I'm an ICU nurse, and tonight, this floor has been cleared for something that has nothing to do with surgery." I stared at her, unable to understand. She leaned closer. "Your son's crash was staged. There is no emergency operation. Dr. Victor Kane is waiting for you to walk into that room so they can create a second crisis. Yours." My mouth went dry. For a moment, I thought she was insane. Then I heard laughter. Not crying. Not panic. Laughter. Claire slowly pointed toward a narrow gap between the shelves. I looked through it, and the world I had known for 68 years collapsed. My son Noah was walking down the hallway in a charcoal suit, completely unharmed. No blood. No bandages. No broken spine. He was holding a cigar. Beside him walked a tall surgeon with silver hair, Dr. Victor Kane. On Noah's other side was his fiancée, Vanessa Cole, dressed in a cream coat, smiling like she had just won a prize. Noah laughed and said, "I can't believe he actually came. The old man still thinks I'm his little boy." Vanessa touched his arm. "Once he signs in, Kane handles the rest." Dr. Kane adjusted his cufflinks. One injection, one cardiac event. By morning, it will look like grief and stress killed him. I stopped breathing. Noah took the cigar from his mouth and smiled. And by next week, we'll be in Vancouver with $5 million. Claire's hand tightened around my wrist. Now do you believe me? She whispered. I couldn't answer, because the man in the hallway was not my son anymore. He was my executioner. Claire didn't wait for me to answer. She pulled me deeper into the narrow storage room and quietly closed the door until only a thin strip of light slipped through the crack. My heart pounded so violently I thought Noah would hear it from the hallway. Stay quiet, she whispered. They still think you're walking toward operating room 3. I struggled to breathe. Everything I had just witnessed felt impossible. My son had been standing there healthy, smiling, discussing my death as if it were another business deal. Why are you helping me? I finally asked. Claire hesitated before answering. Because I've seen this happen before. She reached into her scrub pocket and unfolded an old newspaper clipping. The edges were worn from years of being carried everywhere. A photograph showed a middle-aged man smiling beside a fishing boat. This is my father, Daniel Bennett, she said softly. Officially, he died from complications during routine surgery 8 years ago. Unofficially, he became another profitable patient for Dr. Victor Kane. I looked at her in disbelief. You think Kane murdered him? I know he did. Her voice never shook. I spent years collecting records, comparing deaths, following insurance payments. Every trail led back to him, but nobody believed a young nurse accusing one of the city's most respected surgeons. She opened a small notebook filled with dates, names, and handwritten notes. Every page contained another family destroyed by an unexpected hospital death. My stomach twisted. How many? I whispered. 23 confirmed. Maybe more. I closed my eyes. Noah hadn't simply chosen the wrong people. He had joined a machine that had already been running for years. Claire carefully peeked through the doorway again. They're heading toward conference room 7, she whispered. That's where they always finish the paperwork before the victim arrives. Victim, I repeated. She looked directly into my eyes. Tonight, that's you. I felt the room spinning. Every memory of Noah suddenly seemed different. The expensive gifts, the weekly dinners, the constant questions about my health, the insurance policy, even the organic coffee he insisted on bringing every Tuesday. None of it had been kindness. It had been preparation. Claire gently placed her hand on my shoulder. You can't think like a father anymore, Mr. Holloway. You have to think like the engineer you used to be. Her words struck something inside me. For decades, I had solved impossible mechanical failures by removing emotion from the equation. Every disaster left clues. Every broken system followed a pattern. If I wanted to survive, I needed to stop grieving and start observing. We slipped into the hallway after the voices disappeared around the corner. Claire moved confidently through service corridors that ordinary visitors would never notice. The hospital looked abandoned. Entire wings were dark. Plastic sheets covered equipment. Temporary construction signs blocked several hallways. It was the perfect place for secrets. We stopped outside a maintenance office where Claire unlocked the door using an employee badge. Inside stood a dusty security terminal connected to dozens of surveillance cameras. She powered up the monitor. Grainy images filled the screen. Corridor after corridor appeared empty until camera 12 loaded. Conference room 7. There they were. Noah sat comfortably at the head of the table while Dr. Kane spread documents across polished wood. Vanessa poured champagne into crystal glasses. They weren't celebrating surviving an accident. They were celebrating my funeral before it had even happened. Claire enlarged the image. Dr. Kane opened a folder containing paperwork with my name printed across every page. I leaned closer to the monitor. One document immediately caught my attention. It was a surgical consent form. At the bottom was my signature. Perfect. Identical. Except I had never signed it. Claire looked at me without speaking. She didn't need to. The trap had been built long before I walked through the hospital doors. And somewhere inside Mercy Heights Medical Center, My death had already become official. I couldn't take my eyes off the forged signature. For 40 years, I had signed engineering reports, government contracts, design approvals, and technical audits. My signature had become muscle memory long before Noah was old enough to write his own name. This one was almost perfect. Almost. The curve beneath the final letter leaned 2 degrees farther than mine always did. The pressure mark near the first stroke was heavier than my hand naturally produced. Whoever forged it had practiced dozens of times. Most people would never notice. I did. "They've been preparing this for weeks," I whispered. Claire nodded. "Longer than that." She opened another surveillance feed. The camera overlooked a private administrative office on the same floor. Inside, Noah stood beside a gray filing cabinet, while Vanessa carefully organized folders into color-coded binders. Dr. Victor Kane walked in carrying a locked metal case. He placed it on the desk. Noah smiled. "Tomorrow morning," he said. Kane unlocked the case. Inside were several sealed syringes, medication vials, and official hospital labels. "No unnecessary risks," Kane replied calmly. "Everything must appear routine." Vanessa looked nervous for the first time. "What if he refuses surgery?" "He won't." "How can you be sure?" Kane smiled. "Fear always wins." The surgeon lifted a small bottle filled with clear liquid. "When a frightened father believes his only son is dying, he'll sign anything." Noah laughed. "My father has spent his entire life rescuing me." He leaned back in his chair. "Tonight he'll rescue me one last time." I felt something inside me collapse. Not anger, not fear, disappointment, the deepest kind. Claire quietly muted the speakers. "You can't let them see you lose control." "I raised him," I whispered. "I know. I taught him honesty." "I know. I buried my wife believing our son would carry her kindness into the future." Claire looked away. "I'm sorry." Silence filled the room. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been growing inside my mind ever since she dragged me away from the operating room. "How did you know I was coming tonight?" She hesitated. Then she opened another folder on the computer. Contained a digital schedule. At 8:30 p.m. Patient arrival. 8:42, insurance verification. 8:50, family consent. 9:05, emergency surgical response. 9:18, cardiac arrest. 9:41, death confirmation. 10:05, body transfer. 11 o'clock, insurance notification. Everything had been timed to the minute. I stared at my own death itinerary. They planned every second. Claire nodded. "You're not there first." My breathing became slow and controlled. The engineer inside me was finally returning. "If everything follows a schedule," I said quietly, "then every schedule has weaknesses." Claire looked at me for the first time with something resembling hope. "What are you thinking?" "I spent decades designing naval defense systems. Every secure system fails because someone assumes one component can never break." She folded her arms. "And they expect me to behave like a grieving father." "They do. So let's disappoint them." For the first time since arriving at Mercy Heights, I saw Claire smile. Only slightly, but it was enough. She reached beneath the security desk and pulled out a small flash drive. "I've been collecting evidence for almost 3 years." She inserted it into the terminal. Hundreds of folders appeared. Patient records, insurance documents, financial transfers, death certificates, photographs, private emails, audio recordings. Every file pointed toward the same names: Victor Kane, Vanessa Cole, several hospital administrators, and Noah Holloway. My son's folder was surprisingly thick. I opened it. The oldest document was nearly 14 months old. He hadn't become involved recently. He had been planning this for over a year. The first email chilled me. Subject: financial solution. Victor, my father's policy is almost finalized. Once it's active, we can move forward. Noah. Another message followed weeks later. Double coverage approved. Estimated payout, $5 per million. Then another. Need process completed before loan deadline. Grant becomes impatient after November. I looked up. Who's Grant? Claire's expression hardened. Damian Grant. The lender. You know him? I've heard the name. Everyone in Portland has. She closed another file. He isn't a banker. She paused. He's the reason people disappear. Cold spread through my chest. So Noah borrowed from him. Almost $900,000. I stared at her. 900. He invested in luxury developments that failed. I thought he only lost a few $100,000. Claire slowly shook her head. He lied. The number echoed through my mind. $900,000. No wonder he looked desperate during the past year. No wonder he'd insisted on expensive insurance. No wonder he constantly asked about my retirement savings. He wasn't trying to rebuild his future. He was trying to survive. At my expense. Claire opened another financial report. Several large payments had been wired to shell companies across multiple states. The final destination was hidden behind layers of corporate registrations. Until the last page. Pacific Horizon Holdings. Vancouver, Canada. They weren't planning to stay in Portland. They already bought a waterfront condo. My stomach tightened. They were leaving. The day after your funeral. Neither of us spoke. Outside the maintenance office, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Heavy, slow, purposeful. Claire immediately shut off the monitor. The room went dark. Someone stopped outside the door. A key slid into the lock. Claire's eyes widened. They never come here. The handle slowly turned. My pulse exploded. There was nowhere to hide except beneath the desk. We both dropped to the floor just as the door opened. 2 pairs of polished shoes entered. I recognized one voice instantly. Victor Kane. The cameras glitched again, he said. Probably the old wiring. Another man answered. Maintenance keeps delaying replacement. Neither of them noticed us lying motionless beneath the desk. I could see only their shoes. Kane walked directly toward the computer. If he turned it on, everything Claire had collected would appear. He pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Claire had disconnected the system moments earlier. Kane sighed. Worthless equipment. He closed the cabinet above the monitor. Let's go. The second pair of footsteps turned first. Kane followed. The door clicked shut. Neither Claire nor I moved. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Finally she exhaled. That was too close. I slowly climbed to my feet. No. She looked confused. That was useful. What do you mean? They confirmed something. What? They're nervous. Claire frowned. They've done this before. Exactly. I walked toward the dark monitor. Experienced people don't check broken cameras. Understanding slowly appeared on her face. They're afraid. They know something could still go wrong. I looked back toward the hallway. And frightened people make mistakes. Before Claire could answer, my phone vibrated inside my coat. One new message. Unknown number. I opened it. Only 6 words appeared on the screen. Where are you, Mr. Holloway? Beneath the message, a recent photograph. It showed me entering the hospital only 15 minutes earlier. Someone was still watching. Somewhere inside Mercy Heights, they already knew I had disappeared. For the photograph on my phone was taken from above, from the corner of the lobby where the renovation plastic hung in loose strips from the ceiling. It showed me entering Mercy Heights with rain on my coat and panic in my posture. Whoever sent it wanted me to understand one thing clearly. I was not hiding. I was only temporarily misplaced. Claire took the phone from my hand and read the message twice. Where are you, Mr. Holloway? Her face tightened. That isn't Noah. How do you know? Because Noah would have written Dad. The word hit me with a strange cruelty. Even while planning my murder, he still knew what mask to wear. Claire turned the screen toward me. This is security. The guard downstairs? Or someone above him? She moved quickly now, no longer whispering from fear, but from focus. We need to get you out of the camera network. There's an old staff stairwell behind radiology. No active lenses there since the renovation started. And after that, we find Detective Mara Quinn. I stopped. Police are already here? Claire looked at the dark hallway through the cracked door. One detective is. She's been investigating Kane quietly for 2 years. I sent her a warning when I saw your name appear on tonight's surgical board. Why didn't she arrest them already? Because powerful men don't fall from suspicion. They fall from evidence. I understood that too well. A theory never survived unless the numbers supported it. Claire pulled a black jacket from a maintenance hook and shoved it toward me. Put this on. Keep your head down. Walk like you belong here. The jacket smelled of dust and old paint, but it hid my wet coat. We slipped out of the maintenance office into a narrow corridor lined with stacked drywall and disconnected oxygen tanks. The hospital around us groaned with artificial quiet. Somewhere behind the walls, pipes knocked like distant fists. We reached the stairwell just as voices rose from the hallway behind us. He can't have left the floor, a man said. The elevators are covered. Claire pushed me through the stairwell door and eased it shut without a sound. The stairwell was dark except for a green emergency light. Concrete walls trapped the smell of damp metal. We moved downward, one careful step at a time. On the third landing, Claire stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with her. Below us, another door opened. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. 2 men entered the stairwell. One spoke into a radio. Check every floor. Kane wants him found before 9:30. Claire grabbed my sleeve and pulled me into the shadow beneath the landing. My body pressed against cold concrete. I could hear my own breath scraping in my throat. The men climbed slowly. Heavy boots. One step, then another. I thought of Noah at 7 years old, hiding behind the couch during thunderstorms, whispering, "Don't let the thunder find me, Dad." I had always found him. I had always protected him. Now men were hunting me because he had sent them. The flashlight beam slid across the wall inches from my face. Claire held her breath. I did the same. The men stopped on our landing. "You smell that?" one asked. "What?" "Old man cologne." My stomach turned to ice. The second man laughed. "You're smelling the paint thinner, idiot." They continued upward. We waited until their footsteps faded. Claire leaned close to my ear. "Move." We descended fast, past radiology, past closed administrative doors, into the old ambulance tunnel beneath the hospital. The air changed there. It smelled of wet concrete, diesel, and rust. At the far end, a single gray sedan waited with its lights off. A woman stepped from beside it, one hand inside her coat. She was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and hair pulled tight at the back of her head. She studied me like a witness statement that might be lying. "Ethan Holloway?" "Yes." "Detective Mara Quinn." Her voice was low, controlled, exhausted. "Claire says you walked into your own murder." "I almost did." Claire handed her the flash drive. Kane's files. Insurance, consent forms, payout schedules, patient records. Quinn did not look relieved. "Tell me you copied the board schedule too." "Yes." Quinn opened her trunk and placed a laptop on the flat metal edge. The screen lit her face in cold blue. She inserted the drive. Files began appearing. For several seconds, only the clicking of keys and the drip of water from a ceiling pipe broke the silence. Then Quinn whispered, "God." That one word frightened me more than any shout could have. "What is it?" I asked. She turned the laptop slightly. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Names, ages, estimated assets, insurance limits, medical vulnerabilities, status, completed, pending, under review. My name sat near the top, highlighted yellow. Referral source, N.H. Expected event, acute cardiac failure following emotional trauma. Noah had not only sold me to them, he had categorized me. Quinn scrolled lower. "I've been trying to prove these deaths were connected for 2 years. Kane was too careful. Every body had clean paperwork. Every family was too shocked to ask questions." Claire pointed at one line and went pale. "No." Quinn stopped scrolling. "Claire." Claire's hand went to her mouth. The name on the screen was Daniel Bennett. Her father. Status. Completed. Referral source. A.P. Hospital Board. Payout routed. Cayman account. Claire did not cry loudly. She folded inward, like someone had removed a beam from the center of her body. I reached for her before she hit the tunnel wall. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew he didn't just die." Quinn's jaw hardened. "This is enough to bring Kane in." "And Noah?" I asked. She looked at me. "If we move now, we catch the doctor. Maybe Vanessa. Your son will claim he was pressured." I understood the unspoken part. Noah had money, lawyers, and the instincts of a cornered snake. "Then we don't move yet." Claire looked up. "Ethan, they're looking for you." "Good." Quinn frowned. "You want to go back inside?" They planned for a frightened father. They did not plan for a witness who knows the script. I tapped the spreadsheet. "You need their voices, their words, not files they can call fabricated." Quinn studied me for a long moment. "That is dangerous." "Detective, I was scheduled to die in less than an hour. Danger is no longer new information." For the first time, something like respect crossed her face. She reached into the trunk and removed a small recording device no bigger than a coin. "Clip this beneath your collar. Transmits to my team." "Team." 2 plainclothes officers are outside the building. For more are 10 minutes away. I wasn't prepared for a full hospital conspiracy tonight. Neither was I. Claire wiped her face and stood straighter. Grief had changed her in seconds. It had burned fear out of her eyes and left only purpose. "There's an observation room above Conference 7. We can get him there through Central Supply." Quinn looked at her. "Can you do that without being seen?" "I've done it for 3 years." Quinn closed the laptop. "Then we do it. But listen carefully, Mr. Holloway. You are not to confront your son alone. You are not to improvise." I almost smiled. "Detective." My entire life just became an improvisation. We returned through the ambulance tunnel and up a freight lift that shook like an old lung. Claire stood beside me, silent, one hand still gripping the folded copy of her father's line in Kane's spreadsheet. When the lift opened, we entered a storage level above the conference wing. The ceiling was low. Ducts ran overhead like metal veins. Claire removed a vent cover and motioned for me to climb. My knees protested as I pulled myself into the narrow space. Dust coated my palms. The metal was cold beneath me. We crawled slowly until voices rose beneath us. Claire pointed to a grate. Below, conference room 7 glowed with warm light. Noah paced beside the long table, phone in hand. Vanessa stood near the window, arms crossed. Kane was reading a document with professional calm. A 4th man sat in the corner. He wore the same tactical boots as the lobby guard. Noah's voice carried clearly through the vent. "He should have reached the room by now." Kane turned a page. He panicked. Families often do. My father doesn't panic. Hearing that almost broke me. Even now, Noah knew me. Kane looked up. "Then perhaps you underestimated him." Vanessa stepped forward. "This is becoming messy." Noah snapped at her. "It becomes messy if Grant doesn't get paid." The 4th man finally spoke. "Mr. Grant doesn't care about excuses. He cares about deadlines." His voice was flat, almost bored. Noah rubbed his face. "I know what Damien cares about." Kane placed the document down. "Then find your father. You were supposed to control the floor. And you were supposed to deliver a predictable old man." Vanessa looked toward the door. "Maybe he left." Noah laughed once, bitter and sharp. "He wouldn't leave me. That is the whole point." Those words entered me like a blade because they were true. The trap worked because Noah understood my love better than anyone. He had studied it, measured it, weaponized it. Kane opened the metal case. From above, I saw the syringe again. Clear liquid. White label. My ending in a plastic tube. "If he is not found in 20 minutes, Kane said, "we shift to Plan B." Vanessa went still. "What is Plan B?" Noah didn't answer. The man in the corner did. "Home visit." My blood chilled. Kane nodded. A confused elderly man returns home after receiving false information about his son. He suffers an acute episode. Perhaps he falls. Perhaps he injects himself with medication stolen from the hospital during his paranoid break. Vanessa whispered, "You can make that work?" Kane smiled. "I have made worse look cleaner." Noah walked to the table and picked up a set of keys. My keys. Then we go to his apartment. My hand tightened around the vent frame. Claire touched my wrist, warning me not to move. But then Noah said something that froze both of us. "And if Mrs. Bellamy saw me leave his place earlier, she goes too." Mrs. Bellamy, my neighbor, 76 years old, widowed, the woman who left soup at my door after Evelyn died. Vanessa looked disgusted for half a second. "You're talking about killing an old woman." Noah looked at her with dead eyes. "I'm talking about removing a witness." The room beneath me seemed to tilt. Kane remained calm. "A cardiac event would be believable. She has a pacemaker." Noah nodded. "Do it after my father." Claire's nails dug into my sleeve. My son had no bottom, no last line, no sacred place inside him where mercy lived. Quinn's voice whispered through the tiny earpiece she had given me. "We have the audio. Stay still." Below, the man from Grant stood. "I'll inform Damien the timeline is changing." Noah grabbed his arm. "No. Tell him the money is coming." "Is it?" Noah leaned close. "By tomorrow night, my father will be dead. The policy will be filed, and every asset will be liquidated." The man smiled without warmth. "You'd better hope so." He left the room. Kane closed the metal case. "Your father was useful because he trusted you. If he is frightened enough to run, he becomes unpredictable." Noah's expression changed. For the first time, I saw fear. Not guilt, not sorrow. Fear of losing control. "Then we give him a reason to come back." He took out his phone. Mine vibrated a second later. I looked at the screen in the darkness of the vent. A message from Noah. "Dad, I'm scared. Please come to the operating room. I need you." I stared at the words. There it was again. The little boy in the thunderstorm. The scraped knees. The trembling voice. The mask. Claire watched my face carefully. "Ethan," she whispered. "Don't." I did not move. I did not cry. I simply turned the phone so the recorder could capture the message. Then I whispered into the transmitter, "Detective, I'm going to answer." Quinn's voice came back immediately. "No. He needs to believe I'm still reachable. Mr. Holloway, trust me." My thumbs moved slowly. "I'm coming, son. Hold on." Below us, Noah read the reply. His face relaxed into a smile so cruel I felt the last fragile thread between us finally snap. "See?" he said to Kane. "He'll always come." Kane picked up the syringe case. "Then let's prepare the room." The three of them left Conference 7. Claire and I backed away from the grate. My joints screamed as we crawled through the duct. When we reached the storage level again, Quinn was waiting near the freight lift, weapon drawn, 2 plainclothes officers behind her. "We have enough," she said. "We move now." "No," I replied. "Not yet." Her eyes narrowed. "You are done deciding. They threatened Mrs. Bellamy. If we arrest them here, Grant's man leaves. He warns the lender. People disappear." Quinn glanced at Claire, then back at me. "What are you proposing?" I looked down the corridor toward the operating wing. The red light above room 3 pulsed faintly in the distance, still waiting for me like a false sunrise. "We let them take me to the door." Claire's face went white. "Ethan, no. They need me inside. That means they'll talk until the last moment. They'll confirm everything." Quinn shook her head. "That is too much risk. Detective, my son just ordered the murder of my neighbor like he was changing a dinner reservation. If this net doesn't catch every one of them, it catches nothing." Silence followed. Quinn hated the logic, but she recognized it. Finally, she stepped close and adjusted the recorder beneath my collar. "You do exactly what I say. If I give the word, you drop." "Understood." Claire grabbed my hand before I stepped away. You don't have to prove anything. I looked at her. I know. Then why? I thought of Evelyn, of Mrs. Bellamy, of Claire's father, of every name in that spreadsheet reduced to a payout column. Because for the first time tonight, I'm not walking into a trap. I turned toward the operating wing. I'm carrying one. The hallway to operating room 3 stretched before me, bright, empty, and cold. At the far end, Noah appeared in his charcoal suit, wearing the face of a frightened son. He rushed toward me with his arms open. "Dad!" he cried. "Where were you? I thought I lost you." His embrace felt familiar. That was the worst part. His hands pressed against my back the same way they had at Evelyn's funeral. His cheek touched my shoulder. His voice cracked perfectly. But beneath the performance, I felt the hard shape of something in his pocket. A syringe case. Death had weight, and my son was carrying it against my ribs. "I'm here," I said. My voice sounded calm even to me. "I came for you." Noah pulled back, eyes wet on command. "They need you to sign something before they take me in." "Of course." "I'm sorry, Dad." For one impossible second, I wanted the apology to be real. Then he looked past me toward Kane, and I saw impatience flicker beneath the tears. "This way," Dr. Kane said, appearing beside the operating room doors. Vanessa stood behind him, pale and silent. "Mr. Holloway, we must move quickly." "Is my son going to live?" I asked. Kane placed a hand on my shoulder. "That depends on how brave you can be for him." Behind the frosted glass, the room waited. The false monitors, the forged forms, the needle, my funeral disguised as medicine. Quinn's voice whispered in my ear. "We are in position." Noah squeezed my arm. "Please, Dad." I looked at him, really looked, at the boy I had loved, at the man who had sold me, at the stranger who still knew how to sound like my child. Then I reached for the operating room handle. The metal was cold beneath my palm, and this time nobody pulled me back. The cold steel handle rested beneath my palm. For a brief moment, everything became silent. No footsteps, no monitors, no voices, only the sound of my own heartbeat. I glanced at Noah one last time. His face was perfect, too perfect. His eyes looked frightened, but they weren't searching mine. They were watching Dr. Victor Kane, waiting for a signal. That was all I needed to see. I slowly pushed the operating room door open. The room looked exactly like every operating theater I had ever seen. Bright surgical lights, sterile instruments, patient bed in the center, heart monitor, anesthesia machine. Everything appeared normal, except nothing was connected. The monitor displayed a heartbeat despite having no patient attached. The anesthesia machine wasn't running. Several surgical trays held unopened equipment that no surgeon preparing for an emergency would ever leave untouched. It was a stage, a very expensive stage. Kane stepped beside me with the calm confidence of a man who had rehearsed this moment dozens of times. "Mr. Holloway," he said gently, "your son is fighting for his future." He placed several documents onto a small rolling table. "We only need your authorization." I lowered my eyes. Insurance confirmation, emergency surgical consent, cardiac risk acknowledgement, liability waiver, power of attorney. There it was, hidden among legitimate medical forms, exactly where most frightened parents would never notice. Kane handed me a pen. "If you'll sign here." I picked it up. Behind me, Noah quietly closed the operating room door. The magnetic lock clicked. One sound, one decision. There would be no witnesses, or so they believed. I uncapped the pen. Instead of signing, I adjusted my glasses and pretended to read. My collar microphone transmitted every word, every breath, every movement. Kane remained patient. "We're losing valuable time." "So am I," I answered quietly. He smiled politely. "I understand this is emotional." "No." I looked directly into his eyes. "It's mathematical." For the first time, his expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. He wasn't expecting questions. "What do you mean?" I spent 40 years calculating structural failures. I pointed toward the heart monitor. It already shows 82 beats per minute. Kane didn't answer. It isn't connected to anyone. Silence. Noah immediately stepped forward. Dad. I continued speaking. The anesthesia machine isn't powered. Vanessa's breathing became noticeably faster. The 4 tubing is still sealed. Kane's smile disappeared. Mr. Holloway, and I continued, your surgical gloves are 2 different sizes. He instinctively looked down. Tiny mistake. Human reaction. He had confirmed everything. I slowly placed the pen back onto the table. No emergency surgeon walks into an operating room dressed for a photograph. Nobody spoke. The room had become unbelievably still. Finally, Noah laughed. Not loudly, softly, almost proudly. I told you he'd notice. Kane sighed. So much for the gentle approach. He removed his surgical mask. The polite doctor vanished. A different man stood before me now. Cold, patient, calculating. You've always been intelligent, Mr. Holloway. I know. That's unfortunate. He nodded toward Noah. Noah walked behind me. I heard the click of latex gloves. Vanessa quietly locked another door leading into the recovery room. 3 exits. 3 locked doors. I was exactly where they wanted me. Kane folded his arms. Let's stop pretending. His voice no longer sounded compassionate. You're here because your son needs money. I looked at Noah. He avoided my eyes. You planned this for over a year. He finally answered. You left me no choice. No choice? My debts were your responsibility. You don't understand. No. I nodded slowly. I understand perfectly. I looked toward Vanessa. And you? She swallowed. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No. She shook her head. I only wanted the money. She didn't answer. Kane stepped closer. This conversation serves no purpose. It serves mine. He narrowed his eyes. What purpose is that? So everyone hears your confession. The words escaped before I could stop them. Kane frowned. What confession? I smiled. The one you've been giving for the last 3 minutes. Instantly his eyes dropped toward my shirt collar. Too late. He lunged. His fingers ripped the small recorder from beneath my collar and smashed it against the floor. Plastic shattered. Battery rolled beneath the operating table. Kane smiled again. There. He looked relieved. Now we can continue. I remained perfectly calm. Because the recorder he destroyed wasn't transmitting anymore. Everything had already been sent. Outside the operating suite, Detective Mara Quinn had heard every word. Inside, they still believed they were alone. Kane opened the silver medical case, the same one I had seen through the ventilation grate. Inside rested several syringes. He selected one with a white label. Clear liquid, colorless, harmless looking. Potassium chloride, I said. He looked surprised. You know your medications. I know enough. It works quickly. I know. It leaves very little evidence. I know. He stared at me. You aren't frightened. I thought about that. Maybe I should have been. Instead, I felt tired, deeply tired. I spent months believing I was growing old. I looked down at my hands. The weakness, the numbness, the dizziness. My son caused all of it. Noah looked away. Kane answered instead. The arsenic was effective. Vanessa closed her eyes. Apparently she hadn't known. I slowly raised my head. So it really was arsenic. Nobody answered. They didn't need to. The silence itself confirmed it. For months, every Tuesday morning, every cup of coffee, every smile, every hug, my son had been poisoning me. Something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like an old bridge whose final support beam had finally cracked. No anger remained, only certainty. Noah suddenly spoke. It wasn't supposed to kill you. I looked at him. What? It was only supposed to make you confused. His voice shook now. We needed the court to believe you had dementia. Vanessa stared at him in horror. You told me it was vitamins. He didn't answer. She stepped backward. You poisoned your own father? It was temporary. You said he was becoming sick naturally. She slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed through the operating room. You lied to everyone. Noah grabbed her wrist. I did what I had to. She pulled free. No. Her voice cracked. You did what you wanted. For the first time, the conspiracy began breaking from the inside. Kane immediately intervened. This isn't the time. Vanessa looked at him. What else don't I know? He didn't respond. She pointed toward the syringe. Did you kill those other patients? Silence. 1 second. 2. 3. Then Kane answered. Enough questions. His tone carried no emotion, only irritation. Vanessa slowly backed away from both men. Fear replaced greed in her eyes. She looked toward the operating room door. Locked. Then toward the emergency exit. Also locked. She was trapped inside her own conspiracy. Kane picked up the syringe again. We've wasted enough time. He stepped toward me. Behind him, Noah whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. I studied his face carefully. There were tears now. Real ones. But they weren't for me. They were for himself. For his collapsing future. For the millions disappearing. For the prison waiting outside. Not for the father standing in front of him. I shook my head. No. He looked confused. You aren't. His face hardened again. You think you're better than me? I think. I paused. Your mother would never recognize the man you've become. The words struck harder than I expected. Noah froze. For just a fraction of a second, his confidence disappeared. Kane raised the syringe. Hold him. Noah moved toward me. Outside, very faintly, I heard something. Not hospital equipment. Not footsteps. A radio. Then another. Then, the unmistakable sound of boots running through the hallway. Kane heard them too. His eyes widened. Someone outside shouted, Police! Everything changed in a heartbeat. Kane spun toward the operating room door. Vanessa gasped. Noah's face turned white. And before anyone could react, the heavy doors exploded inward. The operating room doors burst inward with a deafening crash. Blinding tactical lights flooded the room, turning every polished surface into a wall of white. Police! Nobody move! The command echoed through the surgical suite before anyone had time to react. Dr. Victor Kane spun toward the officers, but instinct betrayed him. Instead of raising his hands, he reached for the metal case containing the syringes. Big mistake. 2 detectives slammed him against the wall before his fingers even touched the handle. The case crashed onto the floor. Glass shattered. Medical vials rolled across the tiles. Vanessa screamed and dropped to her knees, covering her head. Noah stood frozen. He wasn't looking at the police. He was staring at me, almost as if he couldn't understand how I was still alive. Detective Mara Quinn stepped through the doorway, her pistol aimed directly at Kane. Victor Kane, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, financial crimes, forgery, and multiple counts of homicide. Kane laughed. Actually laughed. You have nothing. Quinn didn't answer. Instead, she removed a small wireless receiver from her jacket. You spent 10 minutes confessing. Kane's expression changed. The recorder. The one you destroyed? She smiled. It stopped recording because it had already transmitted everything. For the first time that night, Victor Kane looked afraid. Noah suddenly moved. Not toward me, toward the emergency exit. He shoved one of the nurses aside and sprinted through the recovery room. Stop him, Quinn shouted. 2 officers chased after him. Vanessa remained where she was, crying uncontrollably. I didn't know, she kept repeating. I swear I didn't know. Claire entered the operating room moments later. When she saw Kane in handcuffs, she didn't smile. She simply looked at him. 8 years of unanswered questions stood between them. You remember my father? She asked quietly. Kane avoided her eyes. I've treated thousands of patients. His name was Daniel Bennett. Silence. Claire stepped closer. You remember him? Still nothing. She nodded slowly. I thought so. One officer opened the silver medical case. Inside were 6 syringes. Everyone already labeled. Everyone prepared. Quinn carefully picked one up. Forensics. Another detective photographed the labels. A third officer bagged every document lying on the operating table. Insurance forms. Consent paperwork. Power of attorney. Everything. The operation that had been designed to erase me had become a crime scene. I watched in silence. I expected relief. Instead, I felt empty. Someone touched my shoulder. Claire. It's over. I looked at her. No. She frowned. Noah. Almost on cue, Quinn's radio crackled. Suspect still running. Another voice answered. Heading toward the executive wing. Then, a loud crash echoed somewhere above us. Metal. Glass. People shouting. The entire hospital seemed to shake. Quinn immediately grabbed her radio. Report. Static. Then, we've lost visual. She cursed under her breath. He knows the building. I knew something else. No. Everyone looked at me. He knows exactly where he's going. What do you mean? Quinn asked. He isn't escaping. He isn't? I shook my head. Noah never leaves without money. The words hung in the room. Claire understood first. Blackwell's office. Kane's office. I corrected automatically. The financial files. The offshore account information. The backup documents. Quinn immediately turned toward the hallway. Move! Half the officers disappeared. I followed despite Claire trying to stop me. Ethan, I have to. You've done enough. No. I kept walking. I need to see this end. We reached the executive corridor less than a minute later. One office door stood open. The heavy mahogany desk had been overturned. Drawers dumped onto the carpet. Cabinets ripped open. Papers covered the floor like snow. Noah was searching desperately. His suit jacket had disappeared. His white shirt was soaked with sweat. He threw another folder across the room. Where is it? He looked completely different now. Not dangerous. Desperate. Cornered. Like a gambler watching the casino close while still owing millions. He finally noticed us. For one long second, nobody moved. Then Noah slowly raised both hands. I'll cooperate. Quinn didn't lower her weapon. Step away from the desk. I said I'll cooperate. Now. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't confidence. It was surrender. You already won. His shoulders dropped. The money's gone. Quinn frowned. What money? The accounts. He laughed weakly. Grant emptied everything yesterday. Silence. Even Kane, being escorted into the hallway, turned toward him. What? Noah looked at him. You heard me. The accounts are empty. You said the transfers were secure. I thought they were. Noah began laughing. Real laughter. Broken laughter. He used us. Kane stared in disbelief. No. He promised we'd split the insurance. He lied. The surgeon's face turned gray. For years he had manipulated others. Now he realized someone else had manipulated him. Quinn stepped closer. Who's Grant? Neither man answered immediately. Finally Noah whispered, Damian Grant. The name changed everything. Several detectives exchanged nervous looks. Claire leaned toward me. Who's that? I answered quietly. The man who owns everyone's debt. Quinn slowly lowered her radio. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. She already knew the name. Noah sat heavily in the leather chair. It was never about 5 million. What do you mean? Quinn asked. I already owed almost 1 million. His voice sounded exhausted. When the developments failed. He found me. Grant. Noah nodded. He said he had a solution. Kane suddenly exploded. You told me this was your idea. It became mine. You lying little. 2 officers restrained Kane before he could reach him. Noah ignored him completely. He introduced me to Kane. The room became silent. Even Quinn stopped writing. He arranged everything. The insurance, the loans, the timing, the hospital. He said families are easier than banks. Claire covered her mouth. I closed my eyes. It had been bigger than we imagined. Much bigger. Quinn looked at Noah carefully. Where is Damian Grant? Noah smiled sadly. If I knew, I wouldn't be sitting here. He'll kill me. One detective muttered. Not before the courts do. Noah didn't react. He simply stared at the floor. I was dead the day I signed with him. Nobody spoke, because for the first time all night, he sounded honest. Quinn cuffed him personally. As she tightened the restraints, she leaned close enough that only we could hear. If Grant touched this hospital, she paused. Then tonight is only the beginning. Her radio crackled again. Forensics found additional files. What kind? A target list. Quinn's eyes narrowed. How many? The answer came after a brief pause. 12 names. Another pause. 9 marked completed. The hallway fell completely silent. Claire slowly looked at me. 9 people. I looked down the endless corridor of Mercy Heights. The hospital no longer looked like a place where lives were saved. It looked like a factory. One that had been quietly processing human beings into insurance payouts for years. And somewhere beyond Portland, the man who had built the entire machine had just learned that it was collapsing. The words 9 marked completed echoed through the hallway long after the detective lowered her radio. No one moved. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and for the first time since entering Mercy Heights, the building no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a crime scene that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Detective Mara Quinn ordered every entrance sealed. No one leaves this building, she said. Doctors, administrators, contractors, security guards. Everyone stays exactly where they are. Within minutes, plainclothes detectives and uniformed officers flooded the executive wing. Nurses stood frozen in the corridors. Patients watched from half-open doors. The carefully constructed illusion of a normal hospital was collapsing. Noah sat handcuffed in a chair outside Kane's office. He looked strangely calm, almost relieved. I walked toward him slowly. 2 officers stepped aside. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he raised his eyes. I knew you'd come. I studied his face. I always came. A faint smile crossed his lips. Exactly. His answer hurt more than any confession. He hadn't built the trap because he hated me. He built it because he understood me. He knew I would never ignore a call for help from my only child. You used every good thing I ever taught you, I said quietly. No, he shook his head. I weaponized it. The honesty of the statement stunned me. You don't even regret it. His eyes drifted toward the floor. I regret losing. I closed my eyes. There it was, the final piece. Not guilt, not shame, failure. He mourned the plan, not the father. Claire approached carrying a cardboard evidence box. Forensics found these in Kane's private filing cabinet. Inside were dozens of sealed envelopes. Every one contained photographs, families, birthdays, holiday dinners, wedding anniversaries. At first I didn't understand. Then Quinn joined us. They studied the families. What? They profiled relationships. She picked up one envelope. Every future victim. Inside were photographs of me and Noah. Christmas, fishing trips, my retirement party, even Evelyn's funeral. Someone had been watching us for years. Another envelope showed an elderly couple sitting on a porch. Another showed a businessman walking his dog. Another, a woman feeding birds in a public park. Each folder contained handwritten notes, lives, habits, medical history, financial assets, insurance values, family dynamics. Kane hadn't simply murdered people. He had researched them, like an engineer studying blueprints before demolishing a building. Claire opened another file. This one's different. Quinn looked over. The label read, Future Prospects. Inside were names that hadn't yet become victims. Some had yellow tabs, others red. One photograph caught my attention. An elderly schoolteacher. Estimated assets, $2. 3 million. Health condition, early Parkinson's. Recommended approach, medication interaction during scheduled procedure. I felt physically sick. They were planning years ahead. One officer entered the hallway carrying a hard drive. We cracked the backup server. Quinn looked up immediately. What did you find? The officer swallowed. Video archives. Everyone became silent. How many? 37. Claire whispered, "Oh God." The officer continued. Operating rooms, recovery rooms, consultation offices. Kane had recorded everything. Every victim, every fake emergency, every staged consent, every death. Insurance companies required documentation. He had simply never imagined anyone would eventually watch it. Quinn immediately ordered the drives secured. No copies. No internet. No one outside major crimes touches those files. She looked at me. You don't want to see them. I nodded. She was right. Some truths don't heal anyone. Suddenly another detective hurried into the hallway. Detective? What? We found the financial server. And the hospital wasn't receiving most of the insurance money. Quinn frowned. Where did it go? The detective handed her several printed statements. Offshore. Cayman Islands. Singapore. Liechtenstein. But, he hesitated. But what? One account keeps appearing. Quinn read the page. Her expression changed. Damian Grant. Again, the same name, the same invisible shadow behind everything. I walked toward the nearest window. Rain continued falling over Portland. Traffic moved normally. People hurried along sidewalks carrying umbrellas. No one outside knew that inside Mercy Heights, an entire industry of murder had just been uncovered. Claire joined me. My father came here smiling. I looked at her. He trusted them. So did I. She nodded slowly. So did every family. Behind us, officers escorted Victor Kane through the corridor. For the first time, he looked old. Not powerful. Not respected. Just tired. As he passed me, he stopped. I suppose you think you've won. I looked directly into his eyes. No. He smiled faintly. Wise answer. You still don't understand. What? I'm replaceable. A chill ran through the hallway. Quinn heard it too. What do you mean? Kane looked at her. You think hospitals become corrupt because of one surgeon? Nobody answered. He laughed quietly. You've arrested one branch. The roots remain. Two officers pushed him forward. But his final words stayed with us. An hour later, forensic teams continued searching every office. One detective carefully opened a locked cabinet hidden behind Kane's bookshelf. Inside rested several old leather binders, each one labeled by year. Every binder represented another chapter, another list of victims, another series of families destroyed. Claire stared at them. This wasn't happening for months. No, Quinn answered. It was happening for years. Then another officer called from inside the office. Detective. Quinn hurried over. What now? The officer held up a framed photograph. It showed Kane standing beside several people at a charity gala. Hospital executives, city officials, business leaders. One face immediately caught my attention. Gray hair, expensive suit, confident smile. I recognized him instantly. I'd met him once at a fundraising dinner years earlier. His name was engraved beneath the photograph. Damian Grant. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He wasn't some anonymous criminal mastermind. He had been standing beside the hospital's leadership all along, smiling for the cameras, shaking hands, donating money, building influence, while quietly turning vulnerable families into profitable transactions. Quinn stared at the photograph for several long seconds. Then she whispered words none of us wanted to hear. This investigation, she looked at every officer in the hallway, just became a lot bigger than one hospital. Nobody spoke after Detective Mara Quinn's words. The hallway suddenly felt much smaller. For hours we had believed we were dismantling a conspiracy inside Mercy Heights Medical Center. Now we understood something far worse. Mercy Heights wasn't the organization. It was only one location. Quinn carefully removed the framed photograph from the wall and handed it to a forensic technician. "Bag it." The technician nodded. Within minutes, every office on the executive floor had become evidence. Computers, phones, patient files, financial records. Everything disappeared into sealed containers. Yet Quinn didn't look satisfied. She stood perfectly still, staring through the rain-covered windows overlooking downtown Portland. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She answered without turning around. "I'm thinking about timing." "What timing?" Kane was too intelligent. Claire joined us. "What do you mean?" "He recorded everything. He kept financial records. He archived patient files. He documented payments." She finally turned toward us. "People like Victor Kane don't make mistakes this large." I understood immediately. "You think he wanted someone to find them?" Quinn nodded slowly. "Exactly." The realization settled over us like cold fog. The Kane hadn't expected to be caught. Why preserve years of evidence? Claire frowned. "Insurance? No. Blackmail? No." Quinn folded her arms. "Protection." She walked toward Kane's confiscated desk. "If something happened to him," she tapped one finger against the polished wood, "someone else automatically became vulnerable." She opened one of the remaining desk drawers. Empty. Too empty. Every drawer contained ordinary office supplies. Pens, paper, staples. Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. Nothing a man would normally keep after working there for 15 years. "He cleaned this office." "When?" Claire asked. "Before tonight." My stomach tightened. "He knew." Quinn looked directly at me. "He knew someone was coming." Before anyone could respond, another detective hurried into the hallway. We finished searching Kane's vehicle. And nothing. No laptop. No personal phone. No documents. Quinn sighed. "He emptied everything." The detective continued. "Except one thing." He handed her a folded highway map. Paper. Old-fashioned. Covered with handwritten circles. Claire leaned closer. "Those aren't random." The map contained 12 red marks spread across Oregon and Washington. Hospitals. Private clinics. Retirement centers. One location had been crossed out. Mercy Heights. 11 remained. Quinn slowly traced one of the circles. "This isn't over." It never was. My phone suddenly vibrated. Unknown number. Again. Quinn immediately stopped me. "Don't answer." The phone vibrated a second time. Then a third. Finally, a voicemail notification appeared. Nobody had spoken. There was only one sound. A clock. Ticking. Steady. Slow. Then a man's voice. Deep. Calm. Controlled. "I assume Victor disappointed all of you." No introduction. No panic. No anger. Only certainty. "I dislike incompetence." The ticking clock continued behind him. "You've interrupted an investment." Claire looked at Quinn. Neither of them breathed. The voice continued. "Mr. Holloway." He had spoken directly to me. "I admire your resilience. You survived longer than expected." A pause. "I suppose that deserves respect." Another pause. "Unfortunately," the ticking stopped. "Respect doesn't erase debt." The message ended. No threats. No shouting. No demands. Just silence. Quinn replayed it twice. Then 3 times. Finally she whispered, "Damian Grant." Claire looked confused. "How can you be sure?" "Because men like him don't introduce themselves." I stared at the dark phone screen. "He knows I'm alive." Quinn nodded. "He knew before we arrested Kane." One officer entered carrying a forensic tablet. "Detective." "What?" "We traced the voicemail." "And?" The officer hesitated. "It wasn't recorded." "What do you mean?" "It was streamed." "When?" 43 seconds ago. Everyone froze. Claire slowly looked toward the hallway. He's watching. Another detective immediately ordered every security camera in the hospital reviewed. 10 minutes later, the answer arrived. Every hallway camera had briefly disconnected exactly 43 seconds earlier. Someone had entered the hospital network remotely. Someone who still had administrator access. Quinn clenched her jaw. Shut every server down. The IT supervisor shook his head. We can't. Why not? The system controls intensive care. If we disconnect everything, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Patients would die. Grant had designed the network perfectly. Even after the conspiracy collapsed, the hospital remained trapped. Claire quietly sat beside me. He always planned an escape. I nodded. No. She looked at me. He planned survival. There was a difference. A man planning escape expected failure. A man planning survival expected betrayal. Grant had already assumed Kane would eventually be arrested. He had prepared for it. Quinn walked back toward us carrying another folder. We found Kane's emergency protocol. Inside were several sealed envelopes, each marked with a different name. One read, "If Dr. Kane becomes unavailable." Another, "If investigation begins." Another, "If financial assets are frozen." Every disaster already had instructions. Every failure already had a replacement plan. Claire opened the final envelope. Inside rested a single sheet of paper. No signature. No logo. Only one sentence. The orchard survives even when one tree falls. Nobody understood it, except Quinn. Her face slowly lost all color. I've heard that before. Where? I asked. She swallowed. 3 years ago. On another investigation. What investigation? She looked around to make sure no one else was listening. A retirement home outside Seattle. The administrator died before testifying. She stared at the paper. He used the same phrase. The realization hit all of us simultaneously. Mercy Heights wasn't unique. It was one branch of something much larger. Grant wasn't protecting one hospital. He was protecting a network. Somewhere beyond Portland, other doctors, other administrators, other families were still walking into carefully prepared traps. Quinn folded the paper and slipped it into an evidence bag. Then she looked directly at me. Ethan. Her voice was quieter than before. If Grant contacted you personally, I already knew what she was going to say. He isn't finished. She nodded. No. He just chose a different battlefield. At that exact moment, another detective came running from the emergency department. Detective? What now? We found something in Mr. Holloway's Lexus. My heart skipped. I left it outside. The detective looked at me. Someone reached it before we did. What did they leave? He slowly placed a small brown envelope into Quinn's hands. My name was written across the front. Inside, there was only one object. A silver house key. My spare key. The one that had been locked inside my apartment safe. Folded beneath it was a handwritten note. Home is waiting. The silver key felt cold in my hand. I knew that key. It had been locked inside the small fireproof safe in my apartment for years. Noah didn't even know it existed. At least, that's what I had believed. Detective Mara Quinn carefully unfolded the handwritten note. Home is waiting. Nothing else. No signature. No fingerprints. No threat. That was what frightened me most. Grant didn't need dramatic warnings. He preferred certainty. Quinn looked at me. When was the last time you were home? I thought for a moment. Just before I received the call about Noah. She nodded slowly. So your apartment has been empty for several hours. Claire suddenly looked uneasy. Ethan. What? You said your safe door was slightly open before you left. I felt my stomach tighten. I did. What was inside? My passport. Property deeds. Investment records. My wife's jewelry. And I stopped speaking. What? Claire asked quietly. There was another insurance policy. Quinn looked up immediately. What kind? Not mine. My late wife's. Silence. I never cashed it. Why not? Because Evelyn always wanted it kept untouched. It was meant to help Noah someday. Claire closed her eyes. Oh, Ethan. I understood before anyone said it aloud. If Grant had entered my apartment, he wasn't looking for cash. He was looking for documents, proof of ownership, identity, leverage. Quinn immediately called another team. I want officers at Mr. Holloway's apartment now. The reply came almost instantly. They're already there. What do you see? A pause. Then, the front door is locked. No signs of forced entry. Windows secure. Quinn frowned. Go inside. More silence. Finally, the officer answered. The apartment is empty. I let out a slow breath. Maybe we had arrived in time. Then the officer spoke again. Wait. What? Something's wrong. The radio crackled. Everything is clean. What does that mean? It looks professionally cleaned. Claire looked at me. What? The officer continued. Family photographs are gone. Personal documents gone. Computer gone. Hard drives removed. Closets half empty. Quinn's expression darkened. He sanitized it. The officer wasn't finished. The safe is open. What was taken? We don't know yet. I leaned against the wall. Months, maybe years. Grant hadn't only planned my death. He had prepared to erase my existence. No photographs, no documents, no records, as if Ethan Holloway had never lived there. Another detective approached carrying a sealed evidence bag. We found this inside Kane's office. He handed Quinn a small black notebook. Most pages contained coded financial entries. The final page held only several addresses. One of them made my heart stop. My apartment. Next to it, tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Status, property recovery. I stared at the words. They already scheduled it. Claire whispered. They plan to clean out your home the morning after your murder. Quinn carefully turned another page. More addresses. Each matched names from Kane's victim list. Every completed victim had a second visit scheduled. Not by doctors, by cleaners, people responsible for removing computers, letters, photographs, anything that could create questions later. The conspiracy hadn't simply murdered people. It erased them. No memories, no evidence, no unfinished conversations. Nothing. One officer suddenly entered carrying another laptop. We recovered surveillance from the apartment building. Quinn immediately connected it. Security footage appeared. 11:16 p.m. A black delivery van stopped outside my building. Four people exited. None wore masks. They walked confidently, using keys, not forcing doors. 11:22. They entered my apartment. 11:49. They left carrying boxes, computers, paintings, storage containers. 12:03. One man returned alone. He walked back inside carrying a small toolbox. 12:11. He exited smiling. What was in the toolbox? Claire whispered. The detective zoomed in. Electrical equipment. Quinn looked toward me. They installed something. What? We don't know. Immediately another officer radioed the apartment team. Search every room. 5 long minutes passed. Finally, we found it. What? A hidden camera. Another pause. And a microphone. My blood ran cold. They were going to record whoever entered after your death. Claire looked confused. Why? Quinn answered. Insurance disputes. If distant relatives questioned anything, they'd have footage proving nobody tampered with the apartment. Another layer. Another backup. Another precaution. Grant never relied on one plan. He built 10. One detective quietly muttered, "How many people worked for this man?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Suddenly Quinn's personal phone rang. She answered immediately. Quinn. Her expression changed. What? She listened for nearly 30 seconds, then slowly lowered the phone. What happened? I asked. Damian Grant. My chest tightened. What about him? He disappeared. When? Yesterday. She looked almost frustrated. Private jet. No destination filed. No flight plan. No immigration record. He vanished. Claire whispered. He knew. Quinn nodded. He always knew. The room fell silent again. Outside, rain continued falling across Portland. Inside Mercy Heights, officers carried away hundreds of boxes filled with evidence. Yet somehow, the man responsible for everything had already slipped beyond their reach. Another detective approached Quinn. We've identified several shell companies, and they've all been dissolved. When? This morning. Again, hours before Kane's arrest. Grant hadn't reacted. He had anticipated. He wasn't escaping. He was executing a contingency plan written long before tonight. I suddenly remembered something. The voicemail. Quinn looked at me. He said, I repeated the exact words. You've interrupted an investment. Not revenge. Not anger. Investment. That meant one thing. Grant never viewed people emotionally. Only financially. To him, Noah, Kane, Vanessa, even I, were simply assets. Replaceable assets. Claire suddenly looked toward the hallway. Ethan. What? If Grant abandoned Noah, he'll never help him. I slowly nodded. No, and Noah knows that. At that exact moment, shouting erupted from the holding area. Several officers began running. Quinn immediately grabbed her weapon. What now? A young deputy appeared around the corner, breathing hard. It's Noah. What happened? He says. The deputy swallowed. He's ready to tell us where Damian Grant keeps the master records. Quinn looked at me, then toward the holding rooms. If he's telling the truth. She paused. This night isn't over yet. Detective Mara Quinn didn't waste a second. She turned sharply toward the holding rooms, and every officer nearby followed her. I stayed close behind. Noah sat alone inside a temporary interview room, his wrists still cuffed to the metal table. The confidence that had defined him all night was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair damp with sweat, and dark circles had formed beneath his eyes. For the first time in years, he looked like a frightened man instead of a successful businessman. Quinn entered first. You asked to talk. Noah nodded. I'll tell you where Grant keeps everything. Why now? He laughed bitterly. Because he already signed my death sentence. No one interrupted him. He leaned forward. You think prison scares me? It should, Quinn replied. No. He slowly shook his head. Grant reaches prisons. The room became silent. He reaches hospitals. He reaches judges. He reaches bankers. And if he can't buy someone, he replaces them. Claire stood beside me, saying nothing. Noah continued. Everything he owns is controlled through one private archive. What archive? Quinn asked. A warehouse. Where? South River Industrial District. He looked directly at Quinn. Building 27. I watched her expression carefully. She didn't celebrate. She verified. How many people? I don't know. Armed? Always. What will we find? Noah swallowed. The originals. What originals? He closed his eyes. Everything. The insurance files. The financial ledgers. The offshore accounts. The hospital payments. The videos. The names. Claire whispered. Every victim. Noah nodded. Grant never destroys evidence. Why? I finally asked. He looked at me. Control. He owned everyone because he owned the truth. Quinn immediately radioed headquarters. I need tactical units. Location. She gave the address. The dispatcher answered almost instantly. Negative. What? Federal agents are already there. Everyone froze. What federal agents? No information available. Quinn lowered the radio slowly. Someone moved before us. Noah looked genuinely confused. That's impossible. Why? Grant never shares that address. Quinn's phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Detective Quinn. A calm voice replied, "You're too late." Everyone in the room heard it through the speaker. The voice was unmistakably Damian Grant. "I appreciate your persistence, but you're chasing ashes." The line remained perfectly clear. No panic, no background noise, only confidence. Quinn kept him talking. "Where are you?" A quiet chuckle answered. "Far enough. You murdered innocent people. I invested in opportunity. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. I doubt we'll ever meet again." He paused, then continued. "Ask Mr. Holloway a question." Everyone looked at me. Grant spoke again. "Ask him where his wife died." I felt the blood leave my face. Quinn looked at me. "Ethan, my wife." I struggled to speak. "Died at Mercy Heights." Grant laughed softly. "Exactly." Then the line went dead. Nobody moved. Claire slowly turned toward me. "Evelyn." I nodded. "The cardiac procedure." She covered her mouth. "Oh God." Quinn stared at Noah. "Did you know?" He couldn't answer. His silence answered for him. I stepped closer to the table. "When?" He kept looking down. "When did you decide Mom had to die first?" Tears finally appeared. Real tears. "I didn't." "When?" He whispered. 3 years ago." The room disappeared around me. 3 years. Everything suddenly made sense. Evelyn had managed every family account, every trust, every investment. She never allowed Noah unrestricted access to money. She protected him by refusing to enable him. And because she stood between him and Grant, she became the first obstacle. I gripped the edge of the table. So she wasn't just unlucky. Noah cried openly now. "No, you planned it. I didn't think. You paid for it." He nodded. The movement was barely visible, but I saw it. Claire stepped backward. She couldn't look at him anymore. Quinn quietly activated another recorder. "This statement is being documented." Noah didn't care. "I thought Dad would never know." His voice broke. "Kane said there would never be evidence." I closed my eyes. I remembered Evelyn's final week. Her smile, her optimism, the way she squeezed my hand before surgery. "I'll be home for dinner." Those had been her last words. Instead, she never woke up. Noah suddenly looked at me. "I never hated you." I answered immediately. "I know." He seemed surprised. "You don't." "No." I took a slow breath. "Hate requires love. What I feel," I searched for the right word, "is absence." Silence filled the room. The son I had raised disappeared completely in that moment. Only a broken man remained. Quinn finally closed her notebook. "We're done." Officers escorted Noah toward a secure holding cell. As he reached the doorway, he stopped. Without turning around, he spoke one last sentence. "Grant always said," he hesitated, "if one investment fails." He looked back at us. "Start another." The door closed. Claire stood motionless. "What does that mean?" Quinn answered quietly. "It means Grant already has another operation, another hospital, another doctor, another family, another father." The investigation had never been about saving only me. It had uncovered a system still operating somewhere beyond Portland. An hour later, federal agents officially took control of Mercy Heights. The hospital was evacuated, every operating room sealed, every server removed, every financial record cataloged. News helicopters circled overhead as reporters gathered outside the barricades. By sunrise, the story dominated every television station in Oregon. But one name never appeared on the news: Damian Grant. Officially, he didn't exist. No driver's license, no current passport, no registered residence, no verified photograph newer than 5 years. It was as though the man had erased himself long before anyone tried to find him. As dawn finally broke over the city, Detective Quinn joined me outside the hospital entrance. The rain had stopped. For the first time that night, sunlight touched the building. She handed me a paper cup of coffee. I stared at it for several seconds before taking it. She understood immediately. You don't have to drink it. I managed the faintest smile. I don't think I'll ever accept coffee from anyone again. Neither of us laughed. Instead, we watched forensic teams continue carrying evidence from Mercy Heights. Boxes, computers, medical files, entire lives packed into cardboard containers. Quinn looked toward the brightening sky. You survived. I nodded slowly. Yes, but somehow, I looked back at the hospital. It doesn't feel like winning. Before she could answer, another federal vehicle pulled into the parking lot. A man in a dark suit stepped out holding a sealed envelope. He walked directly toward Detective Quinn. Special delivery. She opened it. Inside was only a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. No fingerprints. One sentence. This chapter is closed. The next one has already begun. The sentence echoed in my mind long after Detective Mara Quinn folded the paper. This chapter is closed. The next one has already begun. No signature. No fingerprints. Nothing that could identify who had written it. Only certainty. Quinn slipped the page into an evidence bag and looked toward the federal agents now taking control of Mercy Heights. They're letting us know they're still out there. I stared at the hospital one last time. Only 12 hours earlier, I had walked through those doors believing I was about to lose my son. Instead, I had lost the illusion that I had ever truly known him. The morning air felt strangely clean after the night storm. Police tape surrounded the entire property. News helicopters circled overhead. Reporters shouted questions from behind barricades. Every television station wanted the same story. The respected surgeon, the insurance conspiracy, the attempted murder. None of them understood the truth. The hospital wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even the end. It had only been one stop along a much larger road. A black SUV pulled quietly into the restricted parking area. Two federal investigators stepped out. Neither introduced themselves. One simply handed Quinn another sealed folder. You're going to want to read this somewhere private. She looked at the cover. Operation Orchard. The same word. Orchard. The message from Kane. The phrase Grant had built everything around. Quinn's expression became unreadable. We're leaving. Within minutes, we were inside a secure conference room at the Portland Federal Building. Only 5 people remained. Quinn, Claire, 2 federal investigators, and me. The senior investigator opened the folder. We've been watching Damian Grant for almost 6 years. Claire looked stunned. You knew. We knew someone existed. He corrected himself carefully. We just couldn't prove who. Photographs covered the table. Different cities, different hospitals. Seattle, Denver, Phoenix, Dallas, Boston. Each location marked with dates. Each date followed by unexplained patient deaths connected to unusually large insurance payouts. I slowly realized what I was seeing. Grant hadn't built one criminal enterprise. He had built a franchise. One investigator slid another photograph toward me. This man. The picture showed Grant shaking hands with another surgeon. Not Victor Kane. Someone else. Different city. Different hospital. Same smile. Same expensive suit. Same confidence. How many hospitals? I asked. The investigator hesitated. We've confirmed 11. Claire whispered. 11. And those are only the ones we can prove. The room became silent. Another folder appeared. Financial records. Millions of dollars moving through charities, consulting firms, retirement trusts, and medical foundations. Every trail eventually disappeared offshore. One account alone had received nearly $60 million over 8 years. The investigator tapped the page. This is where Grant becomes interesting. Why? He never spends the money. I frowned. What? He keeps moving it. Why would someone build that much wealth without using it? No one knows. Another photograph appeared. This one showed Grant entering a private airfield 2 years earlier. Beside him, a little girl, perhaps 10 years old, holding his hand. Claire leaned closer. Who is she? The investigator slowly shook his head. We've never identified her. There are no school records. No birth certificate. No passport. Nothing. The photograph raised more questions than answers. For the first time, Damian Grant looked human, not because of his smile, but because someone existed whom he seemed determined to protect. Quinn noticed it too. Everyone has something they don't want to lose. The investigator nodded. Exactly. He opened the final section of the folder. Inside was a handwritten list recovered during an unrelated financial investigation. Most of the names meant nothing to me. Then I saw one that stopped my heart. Ethan Holloway. Beside my name. One word. Resolved. I stared at it. What does that mean? The investigator answered quietly. It means Grant considers you finished. Claire looked confused. But Ethan's alive. Exactly. He closed the folder. And that's what worries us. I frowned. Why? Because Grant never leaves unfinished business. Silence settled over the room. Quinn finally spoke. So if Ethan's marked resolved, she looked directly at me. Either Grant truly believes you're no longer a threat, or he's already moved on to someone else. Those words stayed with me for the rest of the day. 3 days later, I was finally allowed back into my apartment. It no longer felt like home. Forensic powder covered furniture. Evidence markers still sat on the floor. Drawers had been emptied. Closets searched. The place looked as though strangers had borrowed my life for a weekend. Claire helped me unpack the few belongings police had recovered. Books, photographs, a watch Evelyn had given me on our 20th anniversary. Nothing else mattered. As I opened the last recovered storage box, something small slid onto the wooden floor. A sealed envelope. It wasn't addressed. There was no stamp. Someone had hidden it beneath a stack of old engineering manuals. Inside, I found a letter, not from Noah, from Evelyn. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Ethan, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. My hands began to shake. Claire looked at me but said nothing. I continued reading. There are things about Noah I've never had the courage to tell you. I've been protecting him for years, hoping he would change. But if he doesn't, promise me one thing. Promise me you'll choose the truth over guilt. Loving someone doesn't mean following them into darkness. I stopped. My vision blurred. Claire quietly handed me a tissue. I read the final lines. Whatever happens, don't blame yourself. Some storms begin long before we notice the clouds. I folded the letter carefully. For the first time since that terrible night, I cried. Not for Noah. Not for the money. Not even for myself. I cried because Evelyn had seen the darkness long before I had. And despite everything, she had still believed there was hope. Outside, the afternoon sun finally broke through the clouds over Portland. For the first time in years, I opened every curtain in the apartment. Light filled the rooms that fear had occupied for far too long. I didn't know what the future held. Grant was still free. The investigation was only beginning. But one thing had finally changed. I was no longer living to survive. I was living to make sure no other family would ever walk into the same trap.